Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Chats with Chaudhrey. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by SciY's President, Santiago Dominguez. And today we can learn more about SciY and how they can help companies with their lab workflows. So, first of all, Santi, it's lovely to meet you. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well. Thank you very much, Rizwan. And thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to having a chat.
Well, it's great to meet you, and it'll be great to learn more about SciY and what you do. Where are you calling in from? Because we were just talking a little bit before about your background and your Spanish. So, where are you actually calling in from today?
I'm actually in the UK today. And even though I am Spanish, I come from Northwest Spain. I've lived in the UK for the last 29 years. So I still haven't managed to get rid of my Spanish accent, as you can tell. But so today I'm in Herefordshire, which is on the west side of England, close to Wales.
Farming country, I have to say. All right, so look, first question for you is people are watching this going, right, SciY, who are they? So can you give us a background on the company and what technologies you offer?
Yes, of course. So SciY is actually a division of an instrumentation company called Bruker that many of your listeners will, of course, know. It originates or it is created through the addition of several different software companies.
Right.
So even though Bruker is a hardware business, or was rather a hardware business, at some point there is a realization that software is a very important part of delivering value, even through hardware and in fact through integration with many different environments, etc. And at that point, I think there is a conscious effort to acquire a few software companies. And at the moment, SciY is really made up of, I think it's 6 companies, which are all startups. And in fact, I come to SciY and to Bruker through the acquisition of my startup that I co-founded, which is Mestre Lab Research, which was co-founded in North Spain. So we have Mestre Lab, we have ArcSpan, which is an electronic laboratory notebook, registration system, etc. developer, cloud, web-based, etc. We have Optimal Industrial Technologies and Optimal Industrial Automations, which are in the UK, and which are 2 sister companies that specialize on automating manufacturing in the life sciences. So it's all about controlled, monitored, optimized manufacturing. And then we have Sontal, which is a digital platform. We see digitalization as a very important element of driving value these days. And Sontal is a digitalization platform for scientific data. And we also have a small sister to Sontal called Logs, which is targeting the less. So Sontal is focused on the enterprise kind of business, pharmaceutical, biopharmaceutical industry, etc. And Logs is more for academia, smaller companies that still need to secure and capture all the data in an organized fashion, but maybe don't have as many needs around regulatory compliance, etc. Right. So that's a little bit the landscape that we cover.
Right. Okay. And it's very broad. So let me ask, given that you've got so many companies all combined under one banner now, what is your mission and vision then around the company? Because as I said, you're made up of, or currently, because I'm sure you mostly acquire a few more, but you've got 6 at the moment under the SciY banner. So what is the mission statement, the vision behind the company now that Bruker and you're looking at?
And that, I think, is a very important question, particularly when you are made up of a bunch of bits in a way, Rizwan, because obviously, one has to hope that you're not randomly acquiring companies and that there is precisely a mission and a vision that informs it, right? So I think, and this has evolved, obviously, also over time, but right now, and I think this is now it's become very solidified. It has informed the last transactions, and I think we really are where we wanted to be. I will say that our mission is to enable customers to accelerate research, and this is mainly customers in the life sciences and related industries, to accelerate research, get to market faster, and manufacture more efficiently. And to do this, mainly by leveraging the opportunities offered by automation and digitalization, which is where we really see our value. And our vision is very short. We actually formulated as every piece of scientific data matters. And this is, I think, a little bit what we're about, which is making sure that every piece of data is captured and it is treated as an asset. So something that has value, not only at the moment that it is acquired to answer a specific question, but has value later over and over again, because data to us is information, and information is knowledge, and knowledge drives more efficient better processes.
Oh, no, that is interesting. Now, one thing which strikes me though is because you've got 6 different companies, like you said, 6 startups, which have started out with their own culture and their own values. So, what is the core values then for the company now, and how, as president, are you able to incorporate those initial values, if you like, people had when they started their companies, into one which is under the SciY banner and also under the Bruker banner, because obviously you're part of Bruker, so Bruker have their own values as well, I'm sure.
Well, absolutely, and you know, this does not come without challenges.
I'm sure it isn't.
I can tell you that much. I mean, obviously, one of the important things, you need to do this by design, first of all, you know, thinking about the challenge of getting a coherent, cohesive culture that the whole group can identify with. This actually starts by making culture one of the parameters on the basis of which we select potential additional members of the SciY family, right? So that's very important from the start. And when we think about the values, there is another one which, well, there is one which I would say is fundamental, and that is openness and vendor agnosticism.
Right.
And I say it's fundamental precisely because we're part of Bruker. But what we're about is about digitalizing the laboratory and automating the laboratory. And we need to be able to do that by cooperating with any hardware vendor. So we work with all Bruker competitors. We treat them all equally. And we define that as vendor agnosticism, basically. And all the companies that are in my division are the vendor agnostic, and in fact, many people internally call us the vendor agnostic software guys. You know, so this is what differentiates us from everybody else. I think some other of our core values, interoperability and modularity, are very important to us. So we don't believe in presenting customers with what I would call a walled garden concept, in which they have to take a whole solution from us. You know, in part, thanks to having several different companies, we have to be modular and interoperable by design, because we do obviously connect solutions originally developed by different organizations. And that means that we can identify the places where we have specific solutions that add value to the customer landscape or the customer universe, if you like, and provide those, integrating with everything else that the customer has in place. So that's API first, modularity, interoperability, together with the vendor agnosticism are fundamental. I think the other one is fair. And this is a data concept, which is making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So that's very much at the center of our values as well. And then I think we have a culture which is a startup culture. So and what does that mean? You know, I think for us it means being able to be fast, agile, very responsive to customer needs. So we're extremely customer centric, and this is how Mr. Lab was originally built and how it built its reputation. And it's something that I like to see in other companies in the division. And in fact, the companies that have joined us typically have this as an asset as well. So that's a long answer, but hopefully we get a few concepts which are...
It's really interesting. And one thing, you know, being vendor agnostic, I mean, given that, you know, obviously you are part of Bruker though, how easy is it for you when you're talking to customers to convince them that is the case? Because obviously there will be a degree of skepticism, I would say, particularly if they are working with other mainstream vendors. You know, I'm fortunate enough to go to a lot of events and work with a lot of other vendors. So I know, for example, at ASMS, everyone launches, Bruker Daltonics being one of them, but so do all the other vendors. where they're always launching brand new software and have acquired new software companies to work with the new instrumentation that they're launching on Hellway workflows. So there must be a degree of what's the right word? People are quite protective of their instruments and the software that they've got. So how easy is it then for you to come in and say, right, okay, you've got this device, but you've got these other vendors' device. We can help you integrate all of them. How comfortable are companies in terms of allowing you to do that and not going, hang on a minute, we're going to be protected because, or you know, are other suppliers saying no, they don't want you to come in because you work with a direct competitor?
Right. Okay. No, and again, your questions are very pointed because you're really dissecting my everyday concerns and problems with the culture for the many companies and with this as well. I think, you know, when we first announced the SciY concept, this was truly a concern that was there in the market.
Sure.
You know, so I think the market was looking at us a little bit and going, yeah, okay, this is what you say, but will it really be like that? Will you treat Bruker instruments in an advantageous way so that you generate a competitive advantage that way, etc.? And you know, there is no good answer to that question other than walking the walk, right? And I think we have been doing that now for a couple of years. And obviously, maybe the advantage that we had is that some of the startups that became part of SciY have been doing this for a long time. So Mestre Lab, for example, my startup has a 20-year history of being fully vendor agnostic,
right,
and delivering value. And from a rational viewpoint, what I always explain to customers is, look, when I come to your facility, you have all kinds of different instruments, but also you have all kinds of different enterprise softwares in your environment, and a whole bunch of other tools that may be robotics, maybe automation tools, maybe machine learning systems, and I need to integrate with all those. So in a way, being part of Bruker is irrelevant from that perspective, because even if we said all the hardware for complex analytical data is going to be Bruker, that will still probably only be 5 to 10% of the connections we will have to build into the system. And then from that perspective, you know, whether 5% is Bruker, 1% is Bruker, or in many cases, there may be no Bruker, although with NMR, that's unlikely because the Bruker's position is very dominant there, right? But everywhere else, I think, and from the perspective of other vendors, you know, which may perceive Bruker somehow as a competitor, I think, again, we have proven to them by working with them and remaining completely neutral in our product offering, that we're ready to walk this walk, and that Bruker takes the vendor agnostic software business seriously, and certainly I take it very seriously, you know, and to me, this is being the DNA of the business from the beginning. If I go back to launching Mestre Lab in 2004, because nothing else makes sense, Rizwan. I don't see how you would execute what we're aiming to do. If we want to make every scientific data point relevant, usable, and as valuable as possible, we cannot be picking and choosing how those data points are generated,
sure,
what they are generated by, etc. So
exactly.
it makes sense, you know, and customers, I think, by now have accepted it, and vendors have as well. I don't want to say competitors, Bruker competitors mainly, but for us, they're partners, and we have very good partnerships with the Agilents and the Waters and the Thermos, Shimatsus, etc. of this world, which in the end deliver value to our common customer, which is what it's all about, right? I mean, we could go into a corner and fight over this, but in the end, the customer needs us. The customer needs a solution, and the customer knows who their vendors of choice are, and we're here to allow them to use those vendors to get the value that they need from us.
And I also think that the pandemic has changed a lot of that thinking as well, in all honesty, because companies had to be collaborative to just try and get the treatments and therapies out. And I think that changed a lot of companies' mindsets in terms of looking at companies as, yes, they're still competitors, but they can also be partners in different segments of work that you do. And I think that's changed a lot of people's mindset in terms of how you view competitors in the market.
Isn't it amazing what we can achieve when we maybe change a little bit the paradigm and operate with concepts like pre-competitive, right? I mean, I think of our company as pre-competitive, right? Meaning we're not here to build a competitive advantage for a hardware vendor or for a pharmaceutical company. We're here to deliver a platform of solutions that allow everybody to go faster, and then they can have their individual competitive advantages where the core value really is, right? And this is something that COVID certainly taught us. Things like the sequencing, for example. It was only a couple of weeks before the COVID virus sequence was available to the whole world to do research on, right? Which is a first. And that happened a number of times, which meant we had vaccines within 18 months, which is unthinkable. And I hope, it's because it's aligned with our philosophy as well. I hope that we see more and more of that. Rizwan, to me, ultimately, we're working for the patient. We're working for the person that is having access to a bigger quantity of food because food is more resilient or can grow in different climates, etc. Or to the person that is benefiting from a new material, in an electronic device or in any other environment. This is ultimately our customer, and we should fight about the right things because competition, obviously, in our economic system delivers speed, efficiency, and value. But we should also understand that there are many things that can be platforms and can contribute to the whole story without a need for competition.
I agree 100%. Now, let's go something a bit more light-hearted now, as we're talking about values and etc. So, for people I know this, but you actually spell SciY, not SIGH, but SCI with a capital Y at the end. So, why have you got a name called SciY, and why is there a capital Y at the end?
Okay, yeah, very, very good question. Although you are answering the question when you're asking the question, because I'll explain why in a moment. Certainly, SHY would not in any way define anything I'm involved with, but yes. So it's a little bit of a play on words, and we thought about this a lot, believe it or not, even though in the end it's a very short name, right? Obviously, Sci is for science. That's clear. And then what we wanted to play with two concepts. The first one is that we think by really turning data into an asset, so by really making sure that every single piece of data that you generate can be fully exploited, for want of a better word, you are able to answer more profound questions. And to ask the most profound question is why, right? So you can ask what, you can ask how, those are important, and science asks those questions all the time. But ultimately, let's say, if you are a Douglas Adams fan, the meaning of life, the universe, and everything is the why, right?
Sure.
This is ultimately where we're trying to understand, okay, this works this way. We can measure it this way. We can do it. We know what it is. We know how to measure it. But why does it work that way? Because that will give us a whole, I think it's about insight. This is what we're referring to. It will give us a whole additional insight. So we were aiming to represent that. And then at a simpler level, in a way, in science, we're using functions all the time, right? So you have your input is X, your output is Y. So also we're representing that as well, which is getting to the answer, which is the why in any function, if you are to define a question mathematically.
Yeah, that's what I always find it interesting finding out why companies have called their particular name, especially as I've gone for such a basic name for my own company, but that's another story. Brilliant. Now, look, let's talk about your technologies, though. Now, originally I was going to just ask you about lab workflows, but I think listening to you and the companies that you've got incorporated is much bigger than just lab workflows. So, from your perspective, what are the pain points that you see within the sector when you're talking about digitalization of the lab, integration of a lab, everything, because it's not just about lab flows, there's a lot more stuff going on about there. So what are some of the pain points that you see and how you as a solutions provider can help people meet those pain points and help solve them?
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. And in fact, lab workflows are a very important part of this, but you're absolutely right that this is bigger. So I think probably maybe the biggest is the huge variety of data that is generated. And if you think about it, a typical laboratory and as I mentioned at the beginning with Optimal, we even go all the way to manufacturing. So we even have to think beyond the laboratory, right? It generates all kinds of different data types. So obviously complex binary vendor formats, your LCMS, NMR, GCMS, optical spectroscopy data. There may be some simpler kind of alphanumerical, CSV, etc. formats from balances and things like that. JSON and other human readable machine ready formats. And then there are all kinds of formats coming from other software systems, from enterprise software, ELMs, LIMS systems, etc. So we look at this, and I think that the challenge that the industry really has is being able to bring all this data together. So
Right.
I would say that parsing is a massive challenge, and it's one of our core technologies. We have over 700 parsers for 700 different data types, and we're adding over 100 parsers year on year. It's a race to nowhere. There will always be one thing we want support, but obviously we're trying to cover more and more of the landscape as fast as possible. So we see that as a big advantage, which is also, I think, a reason why an across-industry company has to do this. It cannot be done, for example, by a customer because this is a critical mass problem. You need to be able to have the solution in many places to address all these different formats for all these different things. There are images. There are. The other day we're looking at some histopathology data, for example, which has absolutely nothing to do with NMR. But ultimately, if we want to glean the most powerful insights from our data, we want to be able to connect, which is the second big challenge, connect early research data to what happens in development, in manufacturing, and even in the real world once, say, for example, a drug has made it to patients.
Sure,
right? And we should have the whole process informing the beginning of the process so that we get better at designing new materials, drugs or whatever they may be. We were better at developing them. We manufacture them more effectively, which speaks a little bit to our mission of accelerating our customers' research, development, and manufacturing. So I will say the parsing is one. I will say that connection of very different environments through bringing together all the data is the second one. Standardization is another important one, because it's okay to parse the data into one platform, but then you also need to be able to expose this data in a way that it can be used to ask questions about the what, the how, or even the why, and to answer those questions, right? By using, for example, technologies like machine learning, what is generally called AI in its different forms. So we spend a lot of effort into standardization, in many cases because there may not even be published standards for many of the data types that we are wanting to represent. So in some cases we're having to develop those standards. In others, the industry has already made efforts in that direction, which is great when it happens because then we can refer to some documentation and implement it. And then I think also, once we're able to collect all this data, there is a lot of automation within this because we want the data to be captured automatically so that we don't rely on people to make sure that the data is captured in the right way. I love people, but also they are the best tool we have to break systems, right? Systems are great until you put people in them. And automation ensures that you get the best quality of data capture and that you don't miss anything. And then also, I think there is a lot of work to be done around really extracting as much information as possible from the data. So say, for example, if you take an NMR spectrum, there is a huge amount of information within an NMR spectrum. And we spend a lot of effort in some of our companies on developing algorithms that really extract that information. The same applies to, say, for example, a protein LCMS in a proteomics context. We're probably, when humans consume data, we used to reduce data hugely because we are analog in our capacity to handle data. But now that machines can consume the data, we really want to extract as much as possible. So those are the I say the main challenges, and it's crazy, but you go to a customer and you look at the data they are currently being able to capture, and probably they're not capturing 50% of the data into one common environment. So that sounds extremely simple, but it's extremely challenging, and it's the basis to everything else. And then over this we can build a lot of solutions, and we do have a layer we call applications layer, on which we build solutions. And this could be the automation of laboratory workflows that you were referring to at the beginning. For example, let's say that we fully automate the analysis of a purification process so that we can start by selecting the best chromatography method, followed by picking up the best fractions in automation, sending those for downstream analysis, ID confirmation. So we can automate all these things. But what we're really interested in is bringing all the information that's available related to that experiment to actually help us get better insights from the experiment. And that's a work in progress, so I mean, imagine if today, for example, speaking in the NMR Bruker, so let's talk NMR instruments for a second. We expect a scientist to go to the instrument, and because they want to answer a question, to decide they want a proton NMR, an HSQC, an HMBC, and this and that. And what we want to see is a scientist just submitting a sample and saying, did I make the right compound, or what impurities do I have? And if we use the a priori information we have from the ELN about the chemical reaction, from previous reactions about impurities appearing in those kind of systems, and we can then use the NMR, we can then decide to only run some experiments and use all the prior information to enforce an analysis that will use less NMR time, less sample, and give us more information. It's a massive... It's a super exciting challenge because there is so much that can be achieved. And it combines, algorithms with machine learning, with many different disciplines. So, and I think, going back to your question, which was about the workflows and the problems, challenges that we see, we are able to play across the whole landscape. And when we find that there is an area we're not covering well, then we try to use M&A to make sure that we cover it, but always with that concept that if the customer has good solutions in place, we will integrate with them rather than trying to push our whole solution landscape to the customer.
All right. Well, that leads on to another question I've got in my head, actually, you talking about that, is that obviously during the pandemic, it became important, people realized how important automation was and digitalization was, particularly as people were having to work remotely and so on, and have access to different teams all around the world to carry on. As a vendor and someone as a startup who's been working in this for a long time, have you seen that momentum carry on in terms of digitalization within pharma? Or do you think people have sort of fallen back to their old ways of, due to maybe staff turnover, constant change in the industry, well, they're not going to digitalization as fast as they should be?
Well, yeah, we're never going to go as fast as we should, especially from my perspective as a vendor in the space. The quicker, the better. But no, I actually think, Rizwan, that the process has continued. It maybe there was a little bit of a lull in 22, first half of 23, but digitalization is really, I think it's really, you can see it's a really hot area in the last 12 to 18 months, and we're getting huge engagement from our customers. And in fact, Bruker acquired a few weeks ago a company called ChemSpeed, which is a kind of hardware synthesis automation platform. And again, people are very much thinking of that, and we see a lot of interest in that platform as well as a way of generating data, which is interesting, right? You buy all these robotics mainly to generate data that you can analyze. So I think probably because of the, and I will say a significant impact also comes from the explosion with ChatGPT and other generative AI,
Sure.
which I think there were probably people in our industry, a lot of people that understood well already what you could do with machine learning, etc. but ChatGPT in a way democratized it and took it to the C-level suite, right? So if you look at the strategic objectives of most of the corporates that we deal with these days, artificial intelligence is there. And you cannot do AI if you don't have good digitalization. And you cannot automate if you don't have good digitalization. So I think from that perspective is, I like it to go faster always, but I think it has a lot of traction, and I think it's unstoppable now. We're really making important steps, and we're solving problems faster and faster because we have a bigger technology base as well. So yeah, I think we have a little bit of the beginning of a virtuous cycle going on.
Cool. Right. Well, that actually segues beautifully into my next question, actually, which was, or which is, I should say, looking ahead. And you mentioned AI, machine learning, and ChatGPT. What do you see as the future trends within this space, and how are you as a company preparing for those trends?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, I think the industry is starting to understand what could be achieved with artificial intelligence. Right? Let's use the generic term because there are a number of technologies that fit within that. So that's a very big trend, I think. And that trend basically leads to a series of other trends from my perspective. Acceleration is obviously one. And acceleration is not only because you can maybe automate a process and execute it a bit faster, but it's mainly to me about the fact that I think one trend that we are seeing is that predictions will be used more and more to replace experimentation. Initially to reduce experimentation, ultimately possibly to replace it. And you can see a good example of that maybe there is already interest from the regulatory agencies, which you tend to think of as being fairly conservative most of the time. To, for example, reducing as much as possible or completely eliminating animal testing.
Sure.
And this requires predictions. So you have to have very good in silico work or simulations on other systems like, organ-on-chip, organoids, whatever it may be.
I was just about to say that actually. I do a podcast on that. We were talking about that the other day. So
well, fascinating. I'm actually, in my spare time, I'm a technology investor. I'm investing in a couple of companies with those technologies because to me it's an obvious trend. And of course, it makes sense from many perspectives. Obviously, there is a moral, ethical perspective, animal welfare, but certainly there is a cost and speed perspective as well. That's also obvious. So to me, artificial intelligence predictions replacing experimentation and experimentation being better targeted, those are two huge trends, I think. And then I would like to say standardization, which actually prepares us for that, but that I think is not going anywhere near as fast as it should. But that's a little bit why we're kind of inserting ourselves in the middle, trying to help with that translation, right?
But why do you think? Sorry to interrupt you, Santi. One quick question then. You mentioned standardization is not going as quickly as it should. Why do you think that is the case, that it's not going as fast as it should?
I think sometimes the problem is because standardization is perceived as being something which is of value to the whole industry. The whole industry wants to have an input on how it's done. And we end up with
too many chiefs, then, is what you're saying then.
Yeah, we're too democratic on it, So basically, it's like designed by a huge committee. Does not always work well. So sometimes, from a pragmatic perspective, what we have to do is to say, okay, we're going to develop a format. And we're going to put it out there in the hope that the industry will adopt it and it will become standard, right?
Right, okay.
Obviously, open, fully published, etc. Because the alternative is that 30 pharma companies get together and try to drive a process in which they end up defining a standard. But that takes a huge amount of time because there are 30 people in the room. They have other things to do, and that makes processes very slow, very well-intentioned, very valuable, but probably a bit slow if we're going to be practical. So, yeah, standardization, I think, is another one, but it's probably the short leg of the chair at the moment. And it needs to be driven because the rest doesn't really work without it. You cannot do high quality machine learning without standardization, right? And maybe talking about the other trend is obviously automation, robotics, etc. Which it's fascinating how complex the robotics of operating with very small amounts of liquids, for example, can be, right? You think, oh, why has automotive been automated for so long? And chemistry or biology is not. But the complexity actually, when you get into these very small tolerances, is fascinating when you actually start looking at it. And again, robotics is enabled by the previous ones, right? Because you need a robot that can do the physical side of the activity, but it needs a brain that is taking decisions. And within that there are many disciplines: image recognition, so that you make sure you don't miss, and obviously different orchestration methodologies, etc. So all those, I think, are very interesting trends. I was saying, I mean, bigger industry trends. Of course, we know there is a move not only to reducing experimentation, but also new modalities, so that also informs our business because, for example, Mr. Lab comes from a small molecule background. We are chemists, basically, as a company, and we are having to catch up with biology pretty quickly because the industry in biopharma is certainly evolving very much that way, right? And I think that it's interesting to see also that the fair movement, I think, is also an interesting trend. So the fact that academia and government research has actually consciously decided, even though the implementation may still need a bit more work, but it has consciously decided that it has to make all its generated data available for exploitation, which is the fair FAIR concept. That also, I think, will have huge impact. And it already has in some areas, right? In the areas where people have done this early, like, for example, the data sets that AlphaFold used to learn to predict 3D structure of proteins wouldn't be possible without the protein community having at some point made a conscious decision that they were going to make all this protein structure information available. And the same, I think, applies a little bit to genomics as well as another area where that has happened. There are many areas in the industries we are focused on where the intention, I think, now is there. The implementation is still, it's early days, so it needs to be implemented properly.
Right, fantastic. Look, thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting. Now, I've got one final question for you. It's a question I ask every company when I interview them for the first time, which is, it's great what you've said to me about SciY and the solutions you've got, but if I'm a viewer watching this and learning about SciY for the very first time, and there are a lot of companies out there, as you well know, offering integrated solutions and helping to sort things out for companies and so on within this space, and you have to go to all the many shows which are out there which are sort of promoting these companies and these solutions. What makes your solutions unique and different, and why should people come to you and work with SciY?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm guessing I don't have very long to answer it, so I'll do my best in a very short space. I think that we are truly differentiated, first of all, by the way we have architected our solution, because we architected it with the end application in mind. So really thinking of all the different ways in which one data point may be used. And that means that, it's API first, fully interoperable, but it also means that we have actually decided to not commit, and this is our big differentiator, I think. In our digitalization platform, we haven't committed to a data model, right? We have a data-centric concept, which, if you're not deep in the weeds in this issue, may not seem important, but it's actually fundamental, which is that every data point has associated to it all the metadata that gives you all the information needed to relate it to everything else in the system. So you're not restricted by vendor-imposed data models, right? You can develop your own applications and you can develop your own data structures on top of our platform without any restrictions. And that, I think, is unique. And then I think we also are unique from the perspective that we have some technologies like in MesoLab and Optimal, etc., which are algorithms for extracting more information out of complex analytical data types that you would typically find anywhere else. So those, I would say, are the two main pillars. I think I would say, if I had to do a slogan, that with SciY, your data is more your data than in other environments, because you really can use it in any way that you want. So that flexibility in how you can exploit your own data, I think, is a fundamental differentiator.
Brilliant. Well, look, Santi, I really have enjoyed having our conversation. Thank you very much for sharing information about SciY and the technology you've got, and also talking about the trends. It's been really, really interesting. Now, viewers, if you'd like to learn more, first of all, you can connect with Santi, because he's on LinkedIn, and put any comments below this video if you've got any questions based on what he said today. You can also check out the website. The link is above this video. But also you can meet Santi and the team at many, many events throughout the rest of this year and into 2025 as well, I'm sure. And again, the website would have all those details as well as their LinkedIn page. But Santi, thank you very much for your time. It's been lovely to meet you, genuinely. And viewers, I must point out, by the way, that this was all unscripted. Yeah, I mean, there was some structure to the questions to start off with, but we've gone off the reservation quite a few times in this conversation already, as Santi well knows. But he hasn't prepared for it other than coming off the cuff. So thank you very much for being so honest and straightforward with your answers. I really appreciate it. And also, I wish Celta Vigo a fantastic season. I don't wish Man City a great season, obviously, as a Man United fan, but I certainly hope Celta Vigo have a fantastic season as well. So it's lovely to
We have started much better than last year, Rizwan. Last year was scary. At some point, we were looking at relegation material. We're fourth in the Primera Liga this year at the moment. Early days, but it's a good start. Thank you very much for having me. Really enjoyed it. And of course, very happy to talk to anyone who has more questions about any of the things we discussed today.
Brilliant. Well, viewers, thank you for watching. As I said, I hope you found that interesting. I certainly did. Until next time, as always, stay well and stay safe. Bye-bye.